it won't be long and we'll all be thinking about fall food plots. Food plots are a great tool to see critters and also help them nutritionally speaking. But I think most of us plant fall food plots as an aid to see critters. I take it one step further. It can also be a pinch point or bottleneck. Again, for those of us that hunt the big timbered areas, it's hard to find that bottleneck like in ag country in the Midwest. You got 20-yard wide fence row and all the deer traveling that. But if you go in a big timbered area and create a little hide-ho or small quarter-acre food plot, and it's the only lush green forage around, that becomes a great pinch point. I talked about hide-ho or small food plots, but fall food plots go anything from a great big field down to a little micro plot. And that's going to depend on your goal or objective. If you're a guy that likes to get in a blind and use firearms to hunt out there quite a ways, you probably want a larger food plot. Or if there's an awful lot of deer in the area where you're hunting, you want a larger plot so they don't wipe it out the first week or two after you plant it. It's important to remember that deer eat about 5% of their body weight a day, and that's dry weight, all the moisture taken out, because they're gonna get rid of that moisture anyway. So, you know, a 100-pound doe eating 5 pounds a day, and you got 10 or 12 old does and a couple bucks coming into a food plot. When that food plot's first planted and this tall, boy, they can put a hurting on it. So you need to adjust your food plot size based on the number of mouths in that area. And it's important to consider what other food sources are in the area. So that little food plot may not be doing too well. It may be struggling to keep up with the browse pressure until acorns fall. And then acorns fall and deer move off to the acorns and that food plot gets way ahead of them, and then they return back to browse on that once the acorns are gone. You kind of got your design down, what you need, big plots, little plots. Often you need both. I have both on my property. Bigger plots to feed deer and for firearms hunting, and little small hidey-ho to make those pinch points or bottlenecks for archery hunting. But the location, not just the size, but the location can really determine the success of seeing critters at that plot. I really prefer food plots on a ridge top, the highest elevation around. That may be 10 feet higher in some areas, and it may be, you know, several hundred or 1,000 feet higher in other areas. And the reason I really like ridge tops, which seems opposite of what some people think, it might be drier or tougher to get equipment to if you're using equipment, but on that ridge top, the wind's gonna be much more stable. And when you get in that valley situation, the wind can swirl a lot more. And swirling wind, boy, that's the enemy of all hunters. Deer can use their nose and detect us long before they get to the plot. We kind of got a plan for size and where, what to plant's important, and we all want that magic bean. Boy, it's something that's inexpensive and grows everywhere. It's drought resistant, but also grow if it's really wet, and deer love it, but they just don't consume it all. It just keeps growing that fast. Well, that magic bean doesn't exist. That's like Jack and the Beanstalk. It's a nice story, but it's not reality. And I have found that using blends, something that's palatable early season, mid-season, late season, something that's really cold hardy, something that's really drought resistant in case that fall starts off really dry, boy, putting a blend together is about as close as we can get to that magic bean. The mission of a fall plot is often an attraction, so I like something very palatable in that blend. That might even be a few soybeans or buckwheat or something. Even those are warm season species planted in that fall food plot. And they're gonna germinate, come up, and deer are gonna eat those quickly, getting into that plot. And by the time it's cold enough to kill or harm those species, those species have already been browsed off, and now they're moving on to the other species in the blend. Again, a blend gives you a lot of flexibility to meet the mission of your plot. A blend is not 5 different varieties of clover. When we're talking blends, we're a little bit more generic. That might be a couple brassicas, like a radish and a turnip. I'm always gonna have cereal grains in my fall plot. That's your wheat, cereal rye, and oats, not ryegrass. That almost always ends up being a weed species because it makes viable seed and then it grows where you don't want it or when you don't want it to. Cereal rye is in all my blends because it's extremely cold hardy. It's just what I call the old work truck. That thing just always starts and goes. It's like cereal rye. It grows almost anywhere. It's drought hardy. It'll grow down to about 30 degrees or so once it's established, produces a lot of volume. but I wouldn't want just cereal rye because it's not as palatable as other species. So on my blends, I've got a couple brassicas, a couple legumes, maybe that's clovers or something like that, alfalfa, what have you. I'm gonna have a couple of cereal grains. I personally like oats and cereal rye. Oats are really palatable, but not very cold hardy. Cereal rye is not as palatable and more cold hardy, so having both of them in there kind of covers all those bases. A couple broadleaves thrown in there, and that covers all my bases, not only weather-wise and kind of north to south-wise, but throughout the hunting season, early, mid, and late season. When I put clovers in my blend, it's not some real expensive perennial clover. This is a fall food plot. I like strong annuals. There are several of them, and that way they come up and do some good in the fall, not a lot. But then they also come on real strong in the spring for turkey season and add nitrogen to that food plot for the next crop.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
So we've talked about plot size, location, what to plant. We got all that down, we got a plan. How are we gonna get that seed to the soil? And when I say to the soil, it's really important to make good contact with the soil. We use a couple of strategies here at the Proving Grounds. We do a lot with just broadcasting seed. I got an over-the-shoulder broadcaster. You fill the bag up with seed, walk, and turn the handle, and it throws the seed out. That is great for especially smaller plots or hard to get to plots, what I call hidey-hos. The real secret to using that system is make sure any competition, weeds, past crop, whatever, are terminated. You could use a herbicide, a prescribed fire carefully to remove that off there. Make a good seed bed because it's critical to that seed when it's broadcast out, lands on and makes really good contact with the soil. That's step one, really good contact with the soil. And step two is I like to broadcast, now I live close to my property, right before rain. Those raindrops are falling down, they're gonna help that seed make good contact with the soil and ensure there's ample moisture for that seed to germinate rapidly. You gotta remember, seeds are living organisms, so if you throw them out on some dirt and it's just laying there for a full week and the sun's beating down on it, some of those seeds are gonna die. That's a harsh environment for seeds, so planting right before rain will almost always help you have a much better crop. You can use that technique on small or large plots. I always remember when Trace and I were much younger, we broadcast seed on 40 acres of food plots one weekend because it was scheduled to rain. I don't know if I want to walk 40 acres right now with the broadcaster, but it's a tool that can be used in a lot of situations. Maybe you have a more extensive food plot program, or you and a couple of buddies got together and you've got access to a no-till drill. A no-till drill is probably the best tool to plant food plots. You can put that seed the exact depth you want in the soil, cover it up all in one pass. You notice I haven't said anything about using a disc. Now, food plots have been created with a disc for a long time and that works, but disking is about the harshest thing we can do to the soil. When you disc, of course, you're losing whatever soil moisture you have, and going into fall, that's a dry time of year in most areas throughout the whitetails range, and we don't want to lose moisture, we want to save moisture. And of course, disking can result in erosion. If we think about it, disking fluffs up that soil some, and wind or rain can really cause that soil to move off site. And soil is the most important part of a food plot, especially that top part that would be eroded by wind or rain. That's where a lot of the nutrients are. That's the critical part of a food plot. So we want to do everything we can to make sure there's not erosion at our food plots, and often disking leads to erosion. Depending on where you are, there may be enough nutrients in the soil to get going. You never know exactly without a soil test, and soil tests are inexpensive and easy to use. If you don't have time to do a soil test, and I strongly recommend you do a soil test, a good rule of thumb is 2 bags of pelletized lime per quarter-acre plot and about 100 pounds of 10-10-10 fertilizer, often called triple 10. Triple 10 is kind of a generic fertilizer touching all the bases, and that lime will free up some other nutrients in the soil and condition it for better plant growth. I use pelletized lime because it's really tough to spread by hand powdered lime, or what's called ag lime. Pelletized lime is simply lime that's ground really fine and then put together in a pellet with a water-soluble adhesive. It comes apart rapidly when it rains, and this product works really well. It's widely available. Pelletized lime being ground really fine means it reacts with the soil really quickly. Instead of one big pellet, there's 1,000 pieces in there and a lot of surface area. And it's used up quickly. So if you're using pelletized lime, there's a good chance you're gonna have to use it every time you plant the food plot. The last and maybe one of the most important tools I really like about food plots, after we've got it, all that figured out where we're going and we've planted, all that stuff, put a simple utilization cage in there, simply some wire that keeps the deer out so you can see how well your food plot's growing where the deer are not browsing on it. Oftentimes people may think their food plot failed, but it was actually so many mouths in those food plots eating the forage when it's really young that it just wiped it out. That utilization cage is one of the best tools I've found to become a successful food plot farmer. This plot hopefully is going to get you all the way into the spring, and probably next year we'll talk about having warm season food plots. That may seem like extra work, but warm season food plots will keep critters patterned to using food plots on your property and also suppress weeds. And if you get it going right, you may not need any herbicide or anything when you're getting ready to plant that following fall crop. You've kept deer coming right there all the time. We call that not cleaning the table. I mean, the store's open, the grocery store's open every day. They're just on a pattern coming there. And those plants are actually benefiting the soil as they're growing. Fall plots are a great tool for hunting, a place to put trail cameras or to pattern and see deer. Sometimes I like just going out, setting back where I'm not alerting deer and watching deer come and go from the area. There's another benefit to planting food plots, and that's simply that connection to the land. Planting seeds, watching them grow, watching critters use them. That's really a great way to get outside and enjoy creation. More important than getting outside and enjoying creation is taking time every day to be quiet and seek the Creator's will for our lives. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.